Good afternoon, everyone. In the previous class, I taught you about the fungal corneal ulcers. Then I started herpes viral corneal ulcers. In that, I discussed about herpes simplex virus, and I started the herpes zoster virus infections. So, I am in the brief in the herpes simplex virus infection. What are the ocular lesions we see? First, we see three types of lesions are seen. In that, first one is primary herpes, recurrent keratitis, and stromal keratitis. This is about herpes simplex virus infection. So in the primary herpes, first of all, we see some skin lesions. Conjunctiva is infected. Then we see acute follicular conjunctivitis. In cornea, what is the superficial layer of the cornea? The epithelium. So first the epithelium is involved. In that we see fine and coarse epithelial punctate keratitis. And if the superficial stroma is involved, this characteristic lesion we see in herpes simplex virus is dendritic ulcer. So basically, the ocular lesions are primary herpes, where the patient is infected with the first time of the herpes simplex virus infection, and second one is recurrent keratitis, and third one is stromal keratitis. In the recurrent keratitis, whatever the virus which is remained in the dormant state get activated, and it causes ocular lesions. What are the type of ocular lesions we see in case of recurrent keratitis? In that, again, first the epithelium is involved. In that, we will see epithelial punctate keratitis. Then dendritic ulcer is seen. If the dendritic ulcer is not treated, the branches of the dendritic ulcers unite and form the geographical ulcers. Then third type of characteristic type of disease, ocular lesions in herpes simplex virus is stromal keratitis. Here the stroma is involved. The first two types, only the epithelium and superficial stroma is involved. Here the mid stroma and deep stroma is involved. In the different types of characteristic lesions is disciform keratitis, diffuse stromal necrotic keratitis, tropic keratitis, where the corneal nerves are damaged, and herpetic iridocyclitis, that is inflammation of the iris and ciliary body. So these are the different types of ocular lesions in herpes simplex virus infection. So characteristic lesion in case of herpes simplex virus is dendritic ulcer and geographical ulcer. So this is the picture of dendritic ulcer. Here we see a linear branching, and the tips of the branches are knobbed. We see bulgings at the ends of the branches. These bulgings indicates the active replication of the herpes simplex virus. So these branches unite and they form into geographical ulcer. This is the picture of geographical ulcer. It has amoeboid shape configuration. So characteristic lesions we see in herpes simplex virus infection is dendritic ulcer and geographical ulcer. So I will start with the herpes zoster virus infection. So herpes zoster ophthalmicus. So this is an infection of the gastrinal ganglion of the fifth nerve caused by varicella zoster virus. Here the virus is varicella zoster virus. It occurs mainly in the immunocompromised states, and in 10% of these cases have the eye involvement. So basically, varicella zoster virus is a DNA virus. It is a neurotropic in nature. That is, it damages the nerves. So what are the nerves it damages? Frontal nerve is frequently affected, followed by lacrimal nasociliary nerve. The ocular complications occur in 50% of the cases. And the Hutchinson rule states that if there is any skin lesion on the tip or side of the nose, then it definitely involves the eye. So if there is a skin lesions involving the tip of the nose, there is an involvement of eye. So this is the Hutchinson rule. Pathophysiology, this following primary infection, this virus remains dormant in the dorsal root of sensory neural ganglia. It gets activated in the immunocompromised states, and all the system, this central nervous system is involved, skin is involved, optical system is involved, and artery system is also involved. These are the systems involved if the virus get activated. This virus get activated in case in immunocompromised state. So Hutchinson rule you have to remember, if there is a skin lesions involving the nose, then there is a definite involvement of the eye. So this lesions follows a rule called midline rule. That is, the lesions involve only half of the face. Therefore, it doesn't cross the midline of the face. In this picture, you can see in the lesions involving only the half of the face. It has three phases. The herpes zoster ophthalmicus has three phases: acute phase, chronic phase, and relapsing phase. The acute phase resolves within few weeks, whereas chronic phase it lasts for about 10 years. If there is a symptoms which are present beyond 10 years, it is a relapsing phase. So there are three phases: acute phase, chronic phase, and relapsing phase. So what are the general features we see? Like herpes simplex virus, here the patient manifested with fever, malaise, and severe neurological pain. And we see skin lesions. After 3 to 4 days of onset of the disease, we see skin lesions. The skin lesions are characterized by, first initially the skin become red and edematous. This is followed by vesicle formation. So you can see these are the vesicles. In this picture, you can see the vesicle. First the skin become red and edematous, and this is followed by small vesicular skin lesions. These vesicular skin lesions then turn into pustules. Then they burst and appears as a crusting ulcers. So first they start with the vesicles, then vesicles turn into pustules. They pustule burst and forms crusting ulcers. Upon healing, they remain. They leads to scar formation. So permanent pitted scars are left behind. So and it is associated with the severe neurological pain, but the neurological pain subside up with the subsidence of the eruptive phase. In the eruptive phase, what are the changes we see in the skin? First, it starts with the red color discoloration of skin and edematous skin, then followed by vesicles, then followed by pustule formation. The pustules burst and forms ulcers. The ulcers heals and permanent pitted scars are formed. This is associated with the severe neurological pain. This neurological pain subsides with the subsidence of the eruptive phase. That is the acute phase. This is about acute phase. And what are the characteristic ocular lesions we see in acute phase? If the conjunctiva is involved, we see mucopurulent conjunctivitis with petechial hemorrhages, and it is associated with the regional lymphadenopathy. So what are the characteristic features we see in herpes simplex virus? If the conjunctiva is affected, there we see acute follicular conjunctivitis. Here we see mucopurulent conjunctivitis with petechial hemorrhages. And cornea is involved in 40% of the cases. In the eye, first conjunctiva is involved, and it manifests as mucopurulent conjunctivitis in case of herpes zoster virus. And 40% of the cases, the cornea is involved. What are the characteristic features we see in cornea? Like herpes simplex virus, first the epithelium is involved. As the epithelium is a superficial layer, first the epithelium is involved, and we see epithelial keratitis. And after that, the superficial stroma is also involved, and we see microdendritic keratitis. Here we see microdendritic keratitis, unlike dendritic keratitis in herpes simplex virus. And we see nummular keratitis and disciform keratitis. 50% of cases we see disciform keratitis. In the herpes simplex virus also, when the stroma is involved, we see disciform keratitis. But there we see dendritic ulcers. Here we see microdendritic keratitis. And nummular keratitis is seen in herpes zoster ophthalmicus. So what is the difference between the dendritic ulcer and pseudodendrites? There we see branches with the bulgings at the end of the branches. Here we see tapered branches arranged in stellate pattern. So these usually present at the periphery. Unlike dendritic ulcers, they may present at the center. These pseudodendrites is present at the periphery, and they are arranged in stellate pattern, and the ends of the branches of the pseudodendrites are tapered. They have sharp ends, whereas in dendritic ulcer we see a bulged ends. We call it as a knobs. So this is about pseudodendrites. In the initial part, when only epithelium and superficial stroma is involved, we see pseudodendrites in herpes zoster ophthalmicus. And then stroma is involved. Initially, we see nummular keratitis. This is a picture of nummular keratitis. Here, this is nothing but the anterior stromal infiltration. They appear as a multiple tiny granular deposits surrounded by a stromal haze. This is the picture of the nummular keratitis. There are multiple anterior stromal infiltration is seen. They appear as a multiple tiny granular deposits surrounded by a corneal stromal haze. In half of the cases, episcleritis and scleritis is seen, and iridocyclitis is seen. They may associate with the hypopyon and hyphema. Hyphema is nothing but the presence of blood in the anterior chamber. Hypopyon is nothing but the presence of pus cells in the anterior chamber. And in severe cases, the retina is involved as a necrosis is seen. And there is because of the iridocyclitis, there is an increased intraocular pressure, and it may lead to secondary glaucomas. And in severe case, if we don't treat the patient, the complete antisegment necrosis is seen, and there is a complete ciliary shutdown. That is, there is a complete absence of production of aqueous humor, and the eye become shrunken. That we call it as a phthisis bulbi. So every part of the eye is involved. If you don't treat the patient, every part of the eye is involved. First start with the conjunctiva as a mucopollulant conjunctivitis. Then in cornea, we see epithelial keratitis, nummular keratitis, pseudodendrites. Stroma is involved. We see disciform keratitis. And episclera, sclera is involved, iris and ciliary body is involved, and even retina is involved, and there is a chance of secondary glaucomas. And in severe cases, there is a complete antisegment. Antisegment is all the structures which are present in front of the lens. All the tissues become necrosed, and there is a complete ciliary shutdown, and there is a complete absence of production of aqueous humor, and we see shrunken eyeballs. That we call it as a phthisis bulbi. So these are the ocular lesions we see in case of herpes zoster ophthalmicus. As it's a neurotropic in nature, whereas nerves are paralyzed, but the motor nerves like third, fourth, sixth, and seventh nerve is paralyzed, and optic neuritis is seen in case of 1% of cases, and rarely we see encephalitis. So this is all about acute phase. Where in the acute phase we see epithelial lesions, nummular keratitis, pseudodendrites, and involvement of the various nerves, and all the structures of the eyeball are involved. In chronic phase, this acute phase lasts for 2 to 3 weeks. In chronic phase, it may present up to 10 years. It may persist for about 10 years. What are the different characteristics, signs we see in this chronic phases? We see post-herpetic neuralgia, that is persistent pain is present, and the pain is mild to moderate in intensity, and it is worsened at night time, and is aggravated by touch and heat. And we see lid lesions like we see ptosis because of the vesicles formed, which turn into ulcers, and they leave a permanent scars. There is a chance of ptosis, that is a drooping of eyelids, and trichiasis, that is misdirection of the eyelashes, and entropion, that is inward turning of the eyelid margins, and we see notching. So because of the lid lesions, there is a sequel of scarring, includes ptosis, trichiasis, entropion, and notching, and conjunctival lesions because there is we see mucopollulant conjunctivitis. There is a chronic mucus secreting conjunctivitis is seen. Here in chronic phase, the signs and symptoms are less when compared to the acute phase, but even the eyelids are involved, conjunctiva is involved. We see a severe pain, which is worsened at night time, and it is aggravated by touch and heat. So what are the corneal lesions we see in chronic phase? As there is a damage to the trigeminal nerve, there is a neuroparalytic ulceration is seen, and frontal nerve is involved, so that there is an incomplete closure of the eyelids is seen. So there is a continuous exposure of cornea to the outside environment that leads to exposure keratitis. It is associated with the facial palsy, and we see mucus plaque keratitis. These mucus plaques are stained with rose Bengal stain. So these are the corneal lesions we see in chronic phase of herpes zoster ophthalmicus. In same like in acute phase, here also we see scleritis and uveitis. So this is about chronic phase, which lasts for about 10 years. Coming to relapsing phase, this may recur even after 10 years of acute phase of infection. So even after 10 years of infection, still there is a signs of herpes zoster ophthalmicus are present. What are the different signs we see in relapsing phase of herpes zoster ophthalmicus? We see nummular keratitis here, scleritis and episcleritis is seen, mucus plaque keratitis, and secondary glaucomas. So this is about different phases of herpes zoster ophthalmicus infection. 3 phases are there: acute phase, chronic phase, and relapsing phase. Acute phase lasts for 2 to 3 weeks, and chronic phase for 10 years. It is more than 10 years, then we call it a relapsing phase. So coming to the treatment of herpes zoster infection, first we have to give systemic antivirals. So what are the various systemic antivirals we give? We give acyclovir tablets 800 mg 5 times a day for 10 days, or we can give valacyclovir 500 mg 3 times a day for 2 to 3 weeks, and analgesics. To reduce the post-herpetic neuralgia, we can give analgesics. And systemic steroids are given when there is any damage to the third nerve, oculomotor nerve, and optic neuritis. In such cases, we have to start the systemic steroids. And antihistaminics like cimetidine can be given. It is given as a dose of 300 mg 4 times a day for 2 to 3 weeks. It should be started within 48 to 72 hours of onset of the disease. And the patient, because of the disfigurement, there is a lot of depression will be seen in the patient, so that we can give antidepressants like amitriptyline and local therapy of the skin lesions by antibiotic and corticosteroid skin ointment. We have to you can treat the skin lesions, and local therapy of topical therapy with the help of topical steroids, which are given as a dosage of 4 times a day, and adjuvant therapy with cyclopen, the mydriatics, or atropine eye drop eye ointment can be given, or topical antiviral eye ointments like acyclovir, 3% acyclovir, which is as a dosage of 5 times a day for 2 weeks. And to prevent secondary infection, topical antibiotics are also used. So basically, we start with the systemic antivirals. The common drugs used are acyclovir and valacyclovir, and analgesics are given to reduce the pain. If the third nerve is involved and if there is a optic neuritis, we use systemic steroids. Antihistaminics can be given. To relieve the depression, we give amitriptyline. And local therapy, we give skin ointment, antibiotic and corticosteroid skin ointment. And in case of ocular local therapy, we give topical antiviral, cyclopentolate eye drops, steroid eye drops, and antibiotics to prevent the secondary infection. First, as a secondary glaucoma is a complication of the herpes zoster ophthalmicus, we treat the secondary glaucoma with the help of beta blockers like timolol, bitoxol, and acetazolamide. And mucus, as it is associated with the mucus conjunctivitis, mucolytics like acetylcysteine can be given. In case of persistent epithelial defects, we give lubricant eye drops and bandage soft contact lens, so that they promote the healing of the epithelium. So this is about the medical treatment of the herpes zoster ophthalmicus. Basically, it is a viral infection, so we start with the systemic antivirals, and skin lesions are treated with the steroids and antibiotic eye ointment. And topical ocular medication is given as topical steroids, topical mydriatics, topical antiviral eye ointments, and topical antibiotics to prevent secondary infection. So, glaucoma is treated with the pressure lowering drops like timolol, bitoxolol, and acetazolamide tablets. And mucolytics can be given, like example is acetylcysteine. In order to promote epithelial healing, we give lubricating eye drops and we apply bandage soft contact lens. They promote the healing of the epithelial lesions. So as there is a sequelae, we see ptosis, trichiasis, entropy in herpes zoster ophthalmicus. So in case of neuroparalytic corneal ulcer, as there is incomplete closure of the eyelids, we do lateral torsorrhaphy. This is a surgical approach where we tie both the eyelids so that the opening of the eyelid can be reduced, and this by reducing the opening of the eyelids, so that the exposure of the eyeball can be limited. So we can, that is about lateral torsorrhaphy, where both the eyelids margins are sutured together, thereby reducing the opening of the eyelid and thereby promoting the healing of the ulcer. And along with the lateral torsorrhaphy, you can go for a surgical approach like amniotic membrane transplantation or conjunctival flap transplantation on the non-healing ulcer. And tissue adhesives can be used, and bandage contact lens application. Bandage contact lens are used in case of central perforation. And the final approach is, if there is a complete perforation of the cornea, then we have to go for a keratoplasty. So these are the surgical approaches of herpes zoster ophthalmicus. So this is about medical treatment and surgical treatment of the herpes zoster ophthalmicus. So basically 3 phases are there: acute phase, chronic phase, and relapsing phase. Acute phase lasts for 2 to 3 weeks, chronic phase for 10 years, and relapsing phase for more than 10 years. It is a neurotropic in nature, whereas nerves are damaged here. And characteristic lesion we see in acute phase is pseudodendrites, which is different from the dendritic ulcer of herpes simplex virus infection. And numeral keratitis is seen, and disciform keratitis is seen, and all the tissues of the eyeball is involved. The retina is involved, and uvea is involved, that is iris and ciliary body is involved. There is a chance of secondary glaucoma, and acute necrosis, anterior necrosis is seen. And there is a complete ciliary shutdown is also seen if we don't treat the patient in the early stages. So this is about herpes zoster ophthalmicus. Coming to the acanthamoeba keratitis, this is a less common infection. Here the pathogen is acanthamoeba, which is a protozoan. It is seen in less than 1% of cases of infectious keratitis. Here the risk factors are patients who use contact lenses. So, unhygienic usage of contact lenses is a major risk factor for the acanthamoeba infection. And cleaning of the contact lens with the homemade saline is also one of the risk factor. And contamination of the eye with the infection of the acanthamoeba is more in case of contaminated water and in case of contaminated swimming pool water. And trauma also is a risk factor for acanthamoeba keratitis. And trauma of the vegetative matter is also one of, like fungal, this is also one of the cause. And orthokeratology is nothing but the usage of special lenses to correct the refractive error of the patient. In the orthokeratology, we use a special contact lens to change the shape of the cornea. If you unhygienic usage of that lenses may lead to acanthamoeba keratitis. Basically, this acanthamoeba keratitis is more common in unhygienic usage of contact lenses. So what is acanthamoeba? It is a protozoan. It's a free-living protozoan found in fresh and brackish water and soil. It may exist as two forms, active trapezoid form or dormant cystic form. This dormant cystic form is resistant to killing by freezing, desiccation, and protein chlorination of the water. So characteristic features of acanthamoeba keratitis, it is unilateral, like herpes simplex virus. This is a unilateral condition. It is associated with a severe ocular pain because of the keratoneuritis, because it involves the corneal nerves. That is why there is a severe pain is seen in these patients, and is more common in immunocompetent patients. And it fails to respond to the traditional antibacterial, antiviral, antifungal treatment. So what are the clinical features we see in acanthamoeba keratitis? We see a blurred vision, severe pain is there, severe pain in photophore vision, which may be out of proportion to the clinical findings. The clinical findings and signs and everything may remain silent, but the patient may have severe pain because of the keratoneuritis. That is, involves the infiltration of the corneal nerves. So severe pain and photophobia, which is out of proportion to the clinical findings, is seen in acanthamoeba keratitis. Coming to the signs, so in any pathology for epithelium is involved. That in the epithelial, what are the epithelial irregularities we see in acanthamoeba keratitis? We see punctate and linear epithelial keratitis. This is followed by pseudodendrites like herpes zoster. Here also we may see pseudodendritic type of ulcers. This is seen in case of 25 to 50% of patients. And this is the early signs of the disease. Initially, the epithelium is involved as punctate or linear keratitis or pseudodendritic forms. This denotes the early stage of the disease. Later, after epithelium, the stroma is involved, where we see patchy stromal infiltrates, and there is a radial perineural infiltrates. So, along the sides of the corneal nerves, we see infiltrations that we call it as a keratoneuritis. The main reason of the severe pain in acanthamoeba keratitis is because of the radial perineural infiltrations. This is seen in case of 2.5 to 57% of the patients. This is a pathognomic sign of acanthamoeba, where we see radial perineural infiltrations. So along with that, we see ring infiltrations, which is at the junction of pathogen and the host defense mechanism. And here also we see satellite lesions, where we see satellite lesions in the fungal cornea also we see satellite lesions. Here also we see satellite lesion, and there is in final stages there is a stromal thinning, lysis, and perforation of the cornea. So these are the natures of infiltrations we see in case of acanthamoeba. So initially epithelium is involved as punctate and linear keratitis and pseudodendritic forms, and later the stroma is involved as a patchy stromal infiltrations. Then perineural infiltration is seen, which is a pathognomic sign of acanthamoeba keratitis. Then we also see ring infiltrations, satellite lesions, and stromal thinning, lysis, and perforation of the cornea. So it is a slow progressive disease. There are period of remissions in between the active disease. It lasts for days to months, and there is an absence of corneal neovascularization in this acanthamoeba keratitis. And sclera is involved in 11 to 42% as a scleritis. And there is a deep scleral vascular engorgement is seen, and scleral nodules are seen. A resolution of the scleritis may lead to ectasia, that is thinning of the sclera. These are the pictures of scleritis. Here we see the thinning of the sclera. This is the picture showing the thinned out sclera. So in brief, what are the signs we see in acanthamoeba keratitis? Initially, epithelium is involved as epithelial keratinization. They may appear as a diffuse punctate, are epithelial pseudodendrites. And limbus is nothing but a junction between the cornea and sclera. There we see inflammation is seen, and ring infiltration is seen like ring abscess, and there is a progression of peripheral infiltration, and the perineural infiltration we call it as a radial keratoneuritis. And there we also see the enlargement of the corneal nose, which is a pathognomic sign of acanthamoeba keratitis. And eventually, if you don't treat the patient, there is a corneal melting and perforation of the cornea. These are the different signs we see in acanthamoeba keratitis. This is the ring infiltrate. These are the pictures showing ring infiltrations. So coming to the diagnosis, like any corneal ulcers, we have to do the corneal scraping, and we have to take the specimen and send it for the smear and culture and sensitivity. And we can observe the tropozoite and cystic forms with the help of confocal microscopy. And we have to do corneal biopsy in recurrent cases. And polymerase chain reaction test is a highly sensitive test we do in acanthamoeba keratitis. This is about the various investigations we do in acanthamoeba keratitis. In microscopic examinations, it is very difficult to distinguish between the trophozoites and macrophages, because the trophozoites do not stain well. And cysts, they appear as a typical polygonal and double-walled structures. They can be stained with the help of chlorphophore white 0.1%, methylene silver, and periodic acid scrub stains. So different cultures used here is non-nutrient agar, or blood agar, or chocolate agar are used. So polymerase chain reaction, this is the most sensitive method of identifying the acanthamoeba keratitis. So this is about various diagnostic modalities we use in acanthamoeba keratitis. So any ulcer, first we have to take the corneal scraping, and we have to send it for the smear and culture and sensitivity. So based on that, we will know our enemy. Based on that, we start the treatment, whether to give antibacterial or antiviral or antifungal. So all these antiviral, antifungal, and antibacterial do not work in case of acanthamoeba keratitis. So what is the medical management we give in acanthamoeba keratitis? We can use systemic therapy with azoles, like antifungals. This is mainly given when there is when the acanthamoeba keratitis is associated with scleritis, and when it is a deep lesion, and it also involves inflammation of the limbus. We start with the systemic therapy with the azoles. These are nothing but the antifungals. Itraconazole, ketoconazole, fluconazole can be given. Oral oriconazole 200 mg BD dose can be given. So we start with the azoles. So other drugs we give in acanthamoeba keratitis is we give it as a combination therapy. So we give biguanides, polyoxamethylene biguanide, or chlorhexidine, or diamidins. Propamidine and hexamidine is the best drugs for the acanthamoeba keratitis. So we start the treatment with 1 hourly for 48 hours round the clock. That is during night time also. Then we reduce the dose to hourly only during the during the daytime. That is for 72 hours. So first 2 days we give the drug 1 hourly round the clock. That is 24 hours we give 1 hourly. Then after two days we reduce the dose to 1 hourly only in the daytime. That is for 3 days. So after 5 days, again for 5 days we reduce the dose to second hourly. For this second hourly dose is given for 3 to 4 weeks. Then the dose is tapered for about 6 months. As it's a slowly progressive disease with remissions and relapses, so the treatment is continued for about 6 months. If there is any drug toxicity with the diamidins, we continue only with the biguanides. If there is any inadequate response, then we have to reevaluate the diagnosis. We have to again take the specimen, and we have to send the specimen for smear and culture, and we have to rule out whether this is because of the bacterial or herpes viral infection. So aminoglycosides like neomycin, paramycin can also be given. So this is about the treatment of acanthamoeba keratitis. The treatment, first is early epithelial stage, where it's a short course, that is 3 to 4 months. And when the stromal infiltration started, it is a long course of treatment should be given for 6 to 12 months. The only epithelium is involved, we give 3 to 4 months of treatment. The stroma is also involved, we have to give for 6 to 12 months of treatment. So this is a treatment of acanthamoeba keratitis. So in the acanthamoeba, what you have to remember is the patient will have severe pain because of the radial keratoneuritis, that is infiltration of the corneal nerves. The corneal nerves are enlarged, and the patient have severe pain which is out of proportion to the clinical findings. First, the epithelium is involved as a punctate or linear keratitis and pseudodendrites. Then the stroma is involved. we see ring infiltrates, perineural infiltrates, and sometimes we see scleritis, limbitis. The scleritis on resolving, it may lead to ectasia of the sclera, that is thinning of the sclera. So we start with the antifungals and biguanides, diamidine, neomycin and paramycin. So this is about acanthamoeba keratitis. Next is interstitial keratitis. What is the definition of interstitial keratitis? Here it is an inflammation of the corneal stroma without primarily involving the epithelium and endothelium of the cornea. Here only the stroma is inflamed without primary involvement of the epithelium and endothelium. There are different causes for interstitial keratitis. First one is, in the herpes also we see interstitial keratitis, but there are some other causes of interstitial keratitis. In that, first one is congenital syphilis, acquired syphilis. In this, congenital syphilis is more common, and tuberculosis, Cogan syndrome, in case of leprosy, in case of trypanosomiasis, and viral infection with herpes, mumps, and measles. These are the different conditions where we see interstitial keratitis. In the interstitial keratitis, only the stroma is inflamed without primary involvement of the epithelium and the endothelium. In all the lesions, in all the previous diseases, the disease starts with the epithelium, but here in case of interstitial keratitis, there is no primary involvement of the epithelium and endothelium. So what are the clinical features we see in interstitial keratitis? The patient may have severe pain, photophobia, blepharospasm, and circumcorneal conjunctival congestion, anterior uveitis, and keratic precipitates. Keratic precipitate is nothing but the deposition at the proteins at the back of the endothelium, and the patient may have corneal endothelium edema. So these are different clinical features of the interstitial keratitis. This is the inflammatory stromal edema of the superior cornea. So the patient have the ground glass appearance of the deep stromal layers because of the acute inflammation of the stroma. The patient, there is a complete corneal edema and there is a ground glass appearance. Ground glass is appearance nothing but it looks like a opacity. This is the ground glass appearance where the underlying structures cannot be seen clearly. And there is a deep vascularization, and this we call it as a Salmon patch. So this is the picture showing the Salmon patch. As there is a infiltration and inflammation of the stroma, the cornea appears as a ground glass appearance. In the ground glass appearance of the cornea, there is a corneal vascularization. Because of this stromal haze, these vessels appears in dull red in color, and this appears as a patch. That patch we call it as a Salmon patch. The radial bundle of breast-like vessels appears in dull red in color as a patch. That patch we call it as a Salmon patch. So this is seen in interstitial keratitis. Salmon patch is seen in interstitial keratitis. These again after resolution of these infiltration, these vessels appears as a ghost vessels. This is the final stages of interstitial keratitis where the inflammation and infiltration is reduced, and the vessels lack blood and they appears as a ghost vessels in the final stages of the interstitial keratitis. After substance of the infiltration of the stroma, these vessels lack blood and they appear as a ghost vessels. This is a picture showing ghost vessels. And the patient, there is a decreased corneal sensations, and there is a inflammation of the iris and ciliary body, and choroiditis, that is inflammation of the choroid. So these are the things that we see in interstitial keratitis. These two things we have to remember. Hutchinson's triad. This is seen in case of congenital syphilis. It is characterized by interstitial keratitis, Hutchinson's teeth, that is a triangular teeth, and vestibular deafness. If these three pathologies are present, that we call it as a Hutchinson's triad, which is seen in congenital syphilis. What is Cogan syndrome? It is characterized by presence of interstitial keratitis, tinnitus, vertigo, and deafness. These four pathological conditions present, then we call it as a Cogan syndrome. So this is in brief about the interstitial keratitis. The main causes are TB, syphilis, Cogan syndrome, leprosy, trypanosomiasis, and viral infections. Here the primary involvement of epithelium and endothelium is not seen. Only the stromal infiltration is seen. And because of the infiltration and inflammation of the stroma, there is a ground glass appearance of the cornea. in this ground glass appearance, there is a radial bundle of brush-like vessels are seen as a patch, which appears as a dull red in color. That patch we call it as a Salmon's patch. After substance of the infiltration, there is this leads to left out vessels that they lack blood in the vessels, so they appear as a ghost vessels. This is in the final stages of the interstitial keratitis. In the acute stage, we see Salmon's patch. In final stages, we see ghost vessels. So this is about the interstitial keratitis in congenital syphilis. Here in the congenital syphilis, there are 3 stages of interstitial keratitis is seen. That is progressive stage, florid stage, and stage of regression. In the progressive stage, we see edema of the cornea secondary to the anterior uveitis, and because of the anterior uveitis, we see deposits at the level of endothelium that we call it as keratic precipitates. And there is because of the infiltration of the cornea will have ground glass appearance, and this stage lasts for 2 weeks. So in the progressive stage, we see infiltration of the cornea, edema of the cornea, keratic precipitates and seen, and there is a ground glass appearance of the cornea. This stage lasts for 2 weeks. All these 3 stages are about interstitial keratitis caused by syphilis. First stage is progressive stage. This is followed by florid stage. In this stage also, the cornea is acutely inflamed, and we see deep vascularization. Here the vascularization takes place. In this stage, the deep vascularization takes place. It consists of radial bundle of brush-like vessels. They appear as dull reddish pink in color, that we call it as a Salmon's patch. So ground glass appearance is seen in progressive stage, and Salmon's patch is seen in florid stage. This stage lasts for 2 months. In the next stage is stage of regression. In this stage of regression, the inflammation resolves and cornea become clear, and because of the resolution of the lesion, it leads to scar formation as opacities and the ghost vessels. So whatever the vessels which are present in the florid stage lacks the blood, and they appear as a ghost vessels. So ghost vessels are seen in stage of regression. This stage lasts for 1 to 2 years. These are the 3 different stages of interstitial keratitis caused by syphilis. So this is the Salmon's patch, and this is the ghost vessels. This interstitial keratitis is important questions. It may given as 4 marks. So if question arises, these 3 things you have to write. That is ground glass appearance, Salmon's patch, and ghost vessels. So ground glass appearance is seen in progressive stage, Salmon's patch is seen in florid stage, and ghost vessels are seen in stage of regression. So what are the different investigations? Based on etiology, we have to go for we have to do complete blood picture and ESR, chest X-ray for in case of TB, Montauk's test is in case of TB, VDRL and percent trypnoma antibodies absorption test in case of syphilis. Treatment, it also depends on the causative agent. If it is syphilis is a cause, we give penicillin, systemic penicillin. If the virus is a cause, we give antiviral ointments and topical steroids in case of topical steroids can be in order to reduce the infiltration and inflammation of the cornea, and cycloplegics in order to relieve the pain of the patient. So these are the different treatment depends upon the causative agent. So this is about interstitial keratitis. Basically, in the interstitial keratitis, you have to remember about what is Salmon's patch, ghost vessels, and ground glass appearance of the cornea, and 3 stages involved in syphilitic interstitial keratitis. By definition, only the cornea stroma is infiltrated, and there is no primary involvement of the epithelium and the endothelium in case of interstitial keratitis. So Murren's corneal ulcer. This is a immune-mediated corneal ulcer. Whatever the bacterial, fungal, viral, and acanthamoeba are infective corneal ulcers. The Murren's corneal ulcer is a immune-mediated corneal ulcer. So here, there is a involvement. Basically, it is an autoimmune disorder. It appears as a chronic serpiginous or rodent ulcer. It is a severe inflammatory peripheral ulcerative keratitis. Basically, you have to remember this Murren's ulcer, which is a immune-mediated corneal ulcer. It occurs at the periphery of the cornea. That is the periphery of the cornea. The central part is involved at the later stages. Initially, the peripheral part of the cornea is involved. So it is basically a peripheral corneal ulcerative keratitis. It starts as a superficial ulcer at the corneal margin, and it spreads circumferentially and axially over the whole of the cornea. Initially, it starts as a small ulcer at the margin of the cornea, and it spreads circumferentially and axially and involves whole of the cornea. So basically, the ulcer is at the periphery. It is also called as chronic serpiginous or rodent ulcer. It is a rapid progress. It is very rapidly progressive and painful ulcerative keratitis. The patient may manifest with the severe pain. That is Muren's corneal ulcer, which is basically a immune-mediated corneal ulcer. What are non-immune-mediated corneal ulcers? Non-infective or non-immune-mediated corneal ulcer. Two types of ulcer occur. That is non-immune-mediated corneal ulcer. We see neurotropic and neuroparalytic. In neurotropic, the corneal trigeminal nerve is damaged. In neuroparalytic, the facial nerve is damaged. That leads to lag of thumb. That is incomplete closure of the eyelids. So the Muren's ulcer is of two types: benign type and malignant type. Benign type is unilateral type, unilateral condition, and responds well to treatment. It is more common in elder patients. Whereas malignant type, it is a bilateral condition, and poorly responds to treatment, and it is more common in younger people, and it is a progressive disease. It is rapidly progressive. So two different types of Muren ulcers are present. So this is the Muren ulcer in late stages. There is a complete superficial ulceration involving the corneal margin, which spreads circumferentially and axially. The central part of the cornea is healthy here, but the peripheral part of the cornea is damaged by Muren's corneal ulcer. So what is the cause for it? Basically it's an autoimmune disorder. The infection may act as a triggering factor for the autoimmune reaction. The infection it is associated with helminthiasis, hepatitis C, herpes simplex, and zoster. These infections may trigger the autoimmune reaction in the cornea. So there are various theories to explain the etiopathogenesis of the Muren's ulcers. Basically, there is an involvement of antigen-antibody reaction to the infectious toxins deposited at the peripheral cornea. This leads to inflammation, ulceration of the cornea. So basically, there is an antigen-antibody reaction to the infectious toxin, and there is also deposition of immune complex at the periphery of the cornea. And this immune complex deposition leads to autoimmunolysis of the epithelium with the release of collagenollytic enzymes. And other triggering factors for the Muren's ulcer is physical trauma, foreign body deposition, chemical burns, surgeries, post surgeries like cataract and keratoplasty. So these are the triggering factors for Muren's ulcer. Basically, there is an autoimmune lysis of the epithelium because of the release of collagenollytic enzymes. Then because of the release of collagenollytic enzymes, there is a grayish infiltration is seen, which breaks down, forming small ulcers that spreads, and these ulcers spread and they unite, and it destroys the epithelium and superficial stromal layer, forming a whitish overhanging edges. So here we see whitish overhanging edges. It starts as a grayish, small grayish infiltrates, and this infiltrates leads to small superficial ulcers. These superficial ulcers unite with the white overhanging edges. So basically, it is an autoimmune disorder, the immunolysis of the epithelium by collagenollytic enzymes. What are the symptoms we see here? We see severe neurological pain, redness, photophobia, lacrimation, and there is a decreased visual acuity. There is a decreased vision is seen, and it may be associated with the iritis, and rarely central cornea is also involved with irregular astigmatism. That is because of the disturbance in the corneal surface and distortion of the corneal surface, we see irregular astigmatism. So this is a picture. Here we see vascularization. So what are the investigations we do? Complete blood picture, ESR, rheumatoid factor, antinuclear antibodies, antinuclear cytoplasmic antibodies, circulating. We have to check for circulating immunocomplexes, and we have to rule out the syphilis, and we have to check the urine. So treatment. As an autoimmune disorder, we have to give topical steroids. In severe cases, we give systemic steroids, and immunomodulators like cyclosporin can be given. Soft contact lens is used to relieve pain and promote the healing. And in case of severe cases, in what is surgical approach we go in Muren's ulcer is lamellar or full thickness corneal grafts. So this is about Muren's ulcers. Basically, it's an autoimmune disorder. There is an immunolysis of the epithelium by collagenollytic enzymes. And treatment is mainly by the steroids. And surgical approach is lamellar or full thickness corneal grafts. So second type of immune mediated corneal ulcer, that is marginal lateral ulcer. Here this is also immune mediated corneal ulcer, non-infective immune mediated corneal ulcer. Here also we see superficial ulcers. As the name denotes marginal, here also we see peripheral corneal ulcers, superficial ulcers which are present near limbus. Limbus is nothing but the junction of cornea and conjunctiva. That part we call it as a limbus. It is associated with chronic staphylococcal infection. The staphylococcal infection may present as blepharitis or conjunctivitis. It is a hypersensitive reaction to the staphylococcal toxins. So patient is already having the staphylococcal infection as blepharitis or conjunctivitis. Because of the hypersensitive reaction to the staphylococcal toxins present in the body, we see superficial ulcers present near the limbus. This is more common in old people, and there is a complete recurrence is very much common in marginal lateral keratitis. So this is the marginal picture showing marginal keratitis. We see superficial ulcers at the margins, and these ulcers are mainly present near limbus and typically located at point of contact of eyelids. Because as there is an active staphylococcal infection as blepharitis, that is blepharitis is nothing but the inflammation of the eyelid margins. So this marginal keratitis is located at the 4 to 7 o'clock and 10 to 2 o'clock position. So if you see here, the eyelids come to contact at the 4 to 7 o'clock position and 10 to 2 o'clock positions. So in the 8 to 9 and 3 to 4, there is a no contact of eyelids. So these 8 to 9 and 2 to 4 o'clock positions are not involved in marginal lateral ulcer. Only the 4 to 7 o'clock and 10 to 2 o'clock positions are involved, because there is a contact with the eyelid margins. So in the eyelid margins, there is infection with the staphylococcal. There is a deposition of toxins, and there is a hypersensitive reaction to these staphylococcal toxins, and they cause superficial marginal lateral ulcers. Basically, it is a hypersensitive reaction to the staphylococcal toxins. So we see multiple shallow ulcers with infiltration at the peripheral cornea near limbus, and typically located at point of contact of eyelids, that is 4 to 7 o'clock position and 10 to 2 o'clock position. And vascularization is seen at the ulcer bed. So here also, as it is an immune-mediated corneal ulcer, we give topical steroids and we give antibiotics to prevent a secondary infection. And if it is associated with the conjunctivitis and blepharitis, that should be treated first. And to treat the staphylococcal infection, we give oral doxycycline in severe cases. So this is about marginal cataract corneal ulcer. So next is filamentary keratitis. This is the type of keratitis where we see superficial punctate keratitis with formation of corneal epithelial filaments. So here in this picture, you can see these are the filaments. There is a superficial epithelial keratitis that leads to formation of corneal epithelial filaments. Filaments are nothing but thread-like structures. These filaments are nothing but the tag of elongated epithelium due to aberrant epithelial healing. Because of the improper healing of the epithelium, that leads to formation of the filaments. And these filaments, one end is attached to the cornea and other end is movable. Here, if you move this filament, the distal end is attached to the cornea and the proximal end is free. So these filaments are formed because of the improper healing of the epithelium, that leads to elongated tags that we call it as a filaments, where the one end of the filament is attached to the cornea and other end is free. These filaments are stained with fluorescein stain. That's why they attain this green color. So if there is any damage to the epithelium, the fluorescein stain get attached to the remaining corneal structures. And this, when we see in the cobalt blue light, that we appear as a green color. So only one end of the filament is attached to the cornea and other end is freely movable. All these conditions which lead to focal epithelial erosions produce filamentary keratitis. All the conditions which causes focal epithelial erosion. But when the corneal epithelial erosion are formed, in case of these conditions, there is a chronic dryness, that is keratoconjunctivis sicca, and in case of superior limb keratoconjunctivitis, and in case of epithelial erosions caused by herpes or due to recurrent corneal erosion syndrome or due to trachoma infection, there is a continuous chronic epithelial erosions where there is a damage to the epithelium, And because of the improper healing of the damaged epithelium, that leads to formation of thread-like filaments, where the one end of the filament is attached to the cornea and other end is freely movable. And these filaments are stained with fluorescein dye, and they appear as a green color like this. This is about filamentary keratitis. So what is the clinical features we see in filamentary keratitis? Common clinical symptoms like irritation, pain, watering, and foreign body sensation. And treatment is by mechanical debridement and by patching for 24 hours. Patching can be done with the help of soft contact lens, bandage contact lens, and therapeutic soft contact lens can be used to promote the proper healing of the epithelium. So basically, the filamentary keratitis is because of the improper healing of the epithelium. Because of the improper healing of the epithelium, there is a formation of tags where one end is attached to the corneum and other end is freely movable. And treatment is by promoting the healing of the epithelium by mechanical debridement and patching for 24 hours. So coming to the last topic, that is keratopathies. What is keratopathy? First, you have to remember in keratopathy, it's a non-inflammatory disease of the cornea resulting due to disturbance in the metabolic activity of the corneal epithelium. Because of the disturbance in the metabolic activity of the corneal epithelium, that leads to keratopathies. Here, there is no inflammation is involved here. This includes neurotropic keratopathy and exposure keratopathy. Coming to the neurotropic keratopathy, it is a degenerative disease of the corneal epithelium resulting from impaired corneal innervation. In neurotropic, as the name suggests, there is a damage to the corneal nerve, that is fifth cranial nerve, that it may be secondary to the surgical trauma or tumors like acoustic neuroma or systemic diseases like diabetes mellitus and leprosy, or in case of herpes zoster ophthalmitis. In these conditions, the nerve supply of the cornea is damaged and it leads to decreased sensations of the cornea, and the corneal because of the anesthesia and hyperesthesia and disturbed corneal, there is a disturbance in the corneal reflex, and the metabolic activity of the corneal epithelium is disturbed. Because of the damaged corneal epithelium, there is a damage to the there is a defect in the metabolic activity of the corneal epithelium, which leads to accumulation of certain metabolites, which in turn causes edema and exfoliation of the epithelial cells, followed by ulceration. So basically, the main pathogenesis is here because of the loss of trigeminal innervation to the cornea. Because of that, there is a corneal hyperesthesia or anesthesia, and there is a disturbance of the corneal reflexes, and there is abnormal metabolic activity in the corneal epithelium that leads to accumulation of metabolites in the corneal epithelium, that leads to edema and exfoliation of the epithelial cells, followed by ulceration. So what are the symptoms we see in neurotropic? Because of decreased sensation of the cornea, the patient have no pain. Even in any case of ulcer, the patient may have some pain, but here the patient do not have any pain because of the damage of the corneal nerves, and the lids are swollen, and because of the ulcer and corneal edema, there is a decreased vision and decreased lacrimation. Because of the decreased corneal reflex, there is a decreased lacrimation. And signs are, we see ciliary congestion is seen and decreased or absence of corneal sensation, and cornea appears dull due to corneal edema, and epithelial defects are seen. And here, what is the type of ulcer we see here is progressive sterile ulcer. As there is no inflammation, as there is no pathogen is involved, here we see progressive sterile ulcer. So non-infective, non-immune mediated ulcer is seen in case of neurotropic keratitis. So corneal ulcer is typically of horizontal oval in shape and located in the lower half of the cornea with heaped up epithelial buds. Because of the abnormal healing of the epithelium, the ulcer have gray heaped up epithelial borders, and eventually if you don't treat the patient, that leads to corneal melting and secondary infection and perforations of the cornea. So this is the early central, this is picture showing early central epithelial changes. This is followed by persistent epithelial defect with rolled out edges, that is nothing but heaped out edges. Horizontal, you can see the horizontal oval shaped ulcer, which is mainly situated at the lower half of the cornea. Punched out epithelial defects with underlying stromal edema and melting of the cornea. This is a slit lamp picture. Here we see there is a melting of the cornea. So basically, horizontal oval looking ulcer, sterile progressive ulcer with rolled out or heaped up edges is seen in case of neurotropic keratitis. So in this picture, you can see neurotropic ulcer. These are the horizontal oval looking ulcer with heaped up epithelial edges, heaped up epithelium, and it looks like a rolled out edges. This is about neurotropic keratitis. And what is the treatment here? We give antibiotics to prevent secondary infection. This is a sterile ulcer, but we have to give antibiotics to prevent the secondary infection. and cycloplegics and lubricant drops are given, and patching should be done to promote healing. And such special treatment with the help of topical nerve growth factor drops and autologous serum drops can be given. And surgical approach is by applying the amniotic membrane, we can promote the healing of the ulcer. And in final stages, we have to do lateral tarsorrhaphy so that it reduces the opening of the eyelid and prevent the exposure of the cornea to the outside environment, and it promotes the healing of the cornea. So this is about treatment of neurotropic keratitis. Coming to the last one, this is the exposure keratopathy, where we see lag of thalamus. In this condition, there is any disease condition which where there is a incomplete closure of eyelid that leads to exposure keratopathy. As there is a incomplete closure of the eyelids, the eyeball is continuously exposed to the outside environment that leads to drying and desiccation of the corneal epithelium, resulting punctate epithelial erosions, and finally the ulcer formation. So what is the etiology here? Because it is a damage to the seventh nerve, where Bell's palsy, the normal diseases like in case of thyroid eye disease, where we see abnormal protrusion of the eyeball, exophthalmos. In that case also we see there is an incomplete closure of the eyelids, and in case of entropion, what happens, there is an inward turning of the eyelid margins, so that leads to continuous rubbing of the corneal surface. And symblepharon is nothing but the attachment of the bulbar conjunctiva with the palpebral conjunctiva. And in case of deep coma, where the patient is unable to close his eyes, and because of that there is a continuous exposure of the eyeball to the environment, and that leads to drying and desiccation and damage to the corneal epithelium, and which eventually leads to ulcer formation. So symptoms here is ocular irritation, burning, foreign body sensation, redness, and this is an inferior epithelial defect and stromal melting. If you don't treat the patient with antibiotics at this stage, there is a secondary bacterial infection leads to infective ulcer. Signs is drying. We see dry-looking ulcer, punctate epithelial defects are seen, ulceration is seen, secondary infection, and perforations. Prophylaxis is important in case of exposure keratopathy. First, we have to start with the artificial tears or lubricant eye drops and lubricant eye ointment, and the closure of the lid with the by tape or bandage during night time while sleeping, and by applying soft bandage contact lens, the eyeball is covered, and that reduces the exposure of the eyeball. And in case of proptosis, ectropia, and symblepharon, surgical approach should be taken, and tarsorrhaphy, that is by suturing the both eyelid margins, we can reduce the opening of the eyelids and thereby decrease the exposure of the eyeball. So this is the tarsorrhaphy, where we suture the eyelid, upper eyelid and lower eyelid, and we reduce the size of the opening of the eyeball. So this is about exposure keratopathy. So with this, I am concluding this today's class. If you have any doubts, you can message me regarding herpes zoster, herpes simplex, Moorens ulcer, interstitial keratitis, exposure keratopathy, neurotropic keratopathy, inflammatory keratitis. Acanthamoeba keratitis. If you have any doubts, you can ask me now. So no doubts. Doubts may not. If you have any doubts, you can ask me. there is no doubts. Either you have understood completely or you not understood even single part. Okay, I'm concluding the class.